Hey everyone, welcome back to the English Connect podcast, your home for learning English through real-life conversations. I'm your host, Sophia, and joining me as always is the brilliant Jason.
Hey, Sophia. Hey, everyone. Really glad to be here today. How are you doing, Sophia? How has your week been?
Jason, my week has been illuminating in the most uncomfortable way possible.
Okay, I need to hear this. What happened?
So I have this notes app on my phone, and this week I was scrolling through it looking for something, and I accidentally landed on a folder I hadn't opened in a while, a folder called Goals and Dreams.
Okay.
And inside it, Jason, inside this folder, were notes going back 3 years. 3 years of ideas, business ideas, creative projects, things I wanted to learn, places I wanted to go, habits I wanted to build, books I wanted to write. And I sat there reading through them, and I felt this wave of something uncomfortable wash over me.
What was the feeling?
Recognition. Like, I know these dreams. I've thought about them hundreds of times. I've gotten excited about them. I've told people about some of them. And almost none of them have moved at all. They're sitting in that folder exactly as I left them, perfectly preserved, completely unstarted.
Sophia, that is one of the most relatable things you have ever said on this show.
Because you have a folder like that too.
I have a folder like that. Mine is a physical notebook, actually. A beautiful notebook I bought specifically to write my goals in. Very inspirational cover, very empty pages.
The beautiful empty notebook, a classic.
Bought it on a very motivated Tuesday, never opened it on any Wednesday.
And that gap, the distance between the motivated Tuesday and the inactive Wednesday, is exactly what we are exploring today. Because I think most people believe the problem is laziness, or lack of willpower, or not wanting it badly enough.
But what if it's none of those things?
What if it's your brain? What if the very organ that generates your biggest dreams is also, quietly and systematically, the reason you never pursue them?
That's the conversation, and it's one I think people desperately need to hear. Because understanding why your brain stops you changes everything about how you try to move forward.
Today's episode is called I Dream Big But Do Nothing, Why Your Brain Stops You and How to Fix It. And I want to be clear, this is not a motivational speech. This is an explanation. Because once you understand what is actually happening in your mind when you dream big and do nothing, you stop blaming yourself and you start fixing the actual problem.
Which is a completely different and far more effective starting point.
So here's what we have lined up. Jason and I are going to have a real, honest, deeply practical conversation about the gap between dreaming and doing, what causes it, what makes it worse, and the specific things that actually close it.
Then we'll break down 5 vocabulary words and phrases to level up your English.
And we'll close with a challenge so specific that your dream will be one step closer before this episode ends.
Before we dive in, if this podcast has helped you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe. It means everything to us, and it helps more people find these conversations.
And here is our question for you right now. What is the one dream you keep returning to, but have never started? Keep it in your mind. We're about to explain exactly why it's still there and exactly what to do about it.
Let's get into it.
Okay, Jason, let's name it plainly. We all know people, and if we're honest, we are those people, who can talk about their dreams with extraordinary passion and detail, and yet somehow produce almost zero action toward them. Why? What is actually happening?
I think the first and most important thing to understand is that this is not a character flaw. It is a neurological feature. Your brain is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is that what it was designed to do in ancient environments is working against you in the modern one.
Tell me more about that, because I think people hear it's brain science and check out, but this is actually fascinating and genuinely useful.
Okay, so your brain has one primary directive above all others. Not happiness, not achievement, not fulfillment. Safety, survival, conservation of energy, and avoidance of threat.
And that directive was perfect for our ancestors. when the biggest risks in life were physical: predators, food scarcity, dangerous strangers. A brain wired to keep you in familiar, safe territory was a brain that kept you alive.
But now, the biggest risks in our lives aren't physical at all. They're social and psychological. The risk of being judged, the risk of failing publicly, the risk of trying hard and discovering you aren't good enough, the risk of changing your life and having it not work out.
And your brain, the same ancient, powerful, beautifully designed brain, treats those psychological risks with the same threat response it would use for a predator.
Which means pursuing your dream triggers an alarm, not a metaphorical alarm, an actual neurological alarm. The same system that would fire if you were in physical danger starts firing when you think too concretely about taking a big step forward.
So the bigger the dream, the louder the alarm.
Exactly. And that alarm produces very real physical sensations: anxiety, a tight chest, an unsettled stomach, restlessness, avoidance. And we interpret those sensations as evidence that something is wrong, as a sign we should stop, slow down, wait until we feel better.
When actually what we're feeling is not danger, it's importance.
Yes, that discomfort is your brain telling you, this matters, this is real, this is outside my current experience and therefore uncertain. But it has dressed that information in the costume of threat, and we believe the costume.
So the first reason we dream big and do nothing is that our brain has learned to experience our dreams as threats rather than opportunities.
And there's a name for the part of the brain most responsible for this: the amygdala. It processes emotional responses, fear in particular, and it has veto power over behavior. It can essentially override rational thought and produce avoidance responses before you've consciously decided anything.
Have you ever sat down to work on something that matters to you? A project, a goal, something you genuinely want, and suddenly found yourself cleaning the kitchen? Or reorganizing your bookshelf? Or doing literally anything else?
Every single time I try to work on something creative, without fail.
That is not laziness. That is your amygdala redirecting you away from threat and toward safety. The kitchen doesn't require vulnerability. The bookshelf won't judge you. The dream might.
So avoidance is actually a stress response, not a personality trait.
A perfectly rational, elegantly designed stress response, which is important because the solution to a stress response is completely different from the solution to a laziness problem.
If you think it's laziness, you try to force yourself harder. You use willpower. You guilt yourself. You make vision boards. You reread motivational quotes, none of which addresses the actual neurological mechanism.
And that is why people go through cycles of massive inspiration followed by total inaction. The inspiration temporarily overpowers the threat response, but the threat response is chronic. It comes back every morning, and eventually it wins.
The motivation fades, the amygdala remains.
So knowing that the problem is neurological rather than moral, what do we actually do? Because understanding the problem is one thing, solving it is another.
Let's talk about solutions, real ones. What actually works?
The first and most important thing, and I say this knowing it will sound disappointingly simple, is to make the first step so small that it doesn't trigger the threat response at all.
The embarrassingly small step.
The embarrassingly, almost insultingly small step. Because here is what the amygdala is actually responding to. Not the dream itself. The dream is exciting. What it's responding to is the perceived size of the gap between where you are now and where the dream requires you to be.
The canyon between current self and dream self.
Right. And that canyon produces threat. So instead of trying to jump the canyon, which the amygdala will never let you do with enormous and exhausting internal war, you make the first step so small it barely registers as movement. Can you give a real example? Because I think people need to feel what embarrassingly small actually means. Absolutely. Let's say your dream is to write a book. The amygdala hears write a book and generates, you'll need months of your life, you'll have to be good enough, people will read it and judge you. What if it fails? What if you're not a real writer? And the threat response fires.
So instead of write a book,
Instead, you say, today I am going to write one sentence. Not a paragraph, not a page, one sentence. Something true, something about the idea.
and the amygdala's response to one sentence is,
Almost nothing. Because one sentence is not threatening. One sentence is not exposed. One sentence doesn't require you to be a writer. It just requires you to have one thought and put it down.
But here's what I want to push on. One sentence feels too small. It feels like it doesn't count, like it's not real progress.
And that feeling is exactly the trap. Because what one sentence actually does is not build the book. What it does is prove to your nervous system that the territory is safe.
You're sending a scout ahead before the army moves in.
Yes, you're telling your amygdala, look, we went there, we came back, we survived. The territory is not deadly. And each time you do that, the threat response around that action slightly reduces.
Until eventually, writing becomes something your nervous system is accustomed to. And then 2 sentences doesn't feel threatening. And then a paragraph. And the capacity expands because the threat has been gradually dismantled.
Exactly. This is not a hack. This is neuroscience. Gradual exposure to the feared action in small doses literally rewires the threat response over time.
Okay, so strategy 1 is make the first step embarrassingly small. What's strategy 2?
Strategy 2 is what I call separating the dreaming from the planning, because I think one of the most common and underappreciated traps is what happens in the space between inspiration and action.
Explain.
So you get excited about a dream, and the excitement is real, and then almost immediately your brain starts planning. And planning sounds productive, but for most people it becomes a substitute for doing.
You plan instead of start.
You plan endlessly. You research, you figure out the perfect system. You watch videos about how other people did it. You make a detailed plan in a beautiful notebook that you never open again.
Speaking from experience there.
The planning feels like progress because it is active. Your mind is engaged. You are thinking about the dream. But there is a crucial difference between thinking about a thing and doing a thing.
And thinking about it gives you many of the emotional rewards of doing it, the sense of possibility, the excitement, without any of the risk.
Without any of the vulnerability. And the brain, which is always looking for reward with minimal threat, is perfectly happy to let you stay in planning mode indefinitely.
So how do you break out of it?
You set a planning deadline. You allow yourself a defined, limited amount of time to research and plan, maybe 2 hours, maybe 2 days, depending on the scale of the goal, and then you commit to a start date, a non-negotiable start date.
Not, I'll start when I feel ready.
Never when you feel ready, because ready is what your amygdala tells you that you're not. Ready doesn't come before starting. Ready comes from starting.
We've said that before on this show, and it never gets less true.
Because it's one of those truths that needs to be heard again and again until it finally lands. So, planning deadline, start date, move.
What's strategy 3? Because I feel like we need to address the ongoing challenge. Because starting is one thing, staying in motion is another.
Yes, and this is where something I think of as the identity gap becomes crucial.
What's the identity gap?
Okay, so when you have a big dream, let's say you want to build a business, or become a musician, or write, or run a marathon, there is a gap between your current identity and the identity of the person who does that thing.
You don't see yourself as a business owner yet, or a musician, or a writer.
And that gap is not just motivational, it's neurological. Your brain is wired to maintain consistency with your self-concept. It does not like evidence that contradicts who it believes you are. And so every time you take action toward the dream, there is a subtle internal resistance, a feeling of, this doesn't feel like me.
Like you're impersonating someone you haven't become yet.
Exactly. And that imposter feeling is so uncomfortable that many people retreat back to the behaviors and self-concept that feel familiar, even when the familiar is limiting them.
So how do you close the identity gap?
You close it the same way you close any gap, by taking small, consistent actions that gradually shift the evidence your brain has about who you are.
Every time you write a sentence, you are a person who writes.
Every time you go for a run, even a short one, you are a person who runs. Every time you work on the business for 30 minutes, you are a person building a business. You're not claiming the outcome, you're claiming the behavior.
And the behavior, repeated, eventually becomes the identity.
And when the identity shifts, the actions start to feel consistent rather than threatening. Because now you're not impersonating someone. You are someone who does this thing.
That's so powerful and so much more sustainable than motivation.
Because motivation is a feeling. Feelings come and go. Identity is a belief. And beliefs, once shifted, tend to hold.
Okay, strategy 4. Because there's something else I want to address, and that's the role of perfectionism in all of this. Because I think for a lot of big dreamers specifically, perfectionism is the wall that separates the dream from reality.
Oh, yes, big dreamers are particularly susceptible to this because people with big visions can see clearly and vividly what something should look like at its best, which means they can also see with equal clarity how far their first attempt falls short of that vision.
And the gap between the vision and the first draft is so painful that they'd rather not produce the first draft at all.
Ira Glass, a famous American radio producer, described this so beautifully. He said that when you first start creating, you have great taste. You know what good looks like, but your ability hasn't caught up to your taste yet. And so everything you make falls short of your own standard. And that gap is the hardest time, because it's the time when most people quit.
They mistake the gap for evidence that they're not talented enough, when actually it's evidence that they have good taste and are in the early stages of developing skill.
And the only way through the gap, the only way, is to keep making things, imperfect things, things that don't match the vision, quantity before quality, because skill only develops through repetition, through making the imperfect thing again and again, until the thing you make starts to approach the thing you can imagine.
So the perfectionist who never starts is actually protecting their vision at the cost of developing the skill to realize it.
They've made their taste the enemy of their progress, when actually their taste is their greatest asset, if they can tolerate the gap long enough to grow into it.
So strategy 4 is make peace with the imperfect first attempt. Deliberately, explicitly, decide in advance that your first version will not be good. Name it a draft. Name it an experiment. Name it version 1. Remove the pressure of quality from the beginning.
And the moment you remove the pressure of quality from the first step, the amygdala's threat response drops significantly. Because now you can't fail. You're just experimenting. And experiments don't fail. They produce information.
Scientists, not performers. We've said that before too.
It keeps being the right frame. Because scientists expect imperfect results. Scientists learn from imperfect results. Scientists use imperfect results to design better experiments. That is the whole methodology.
Okay, I want to end with something I think is the most important and most overlooked piece of the whole puzzle, and that's the question of why. Not what you want to do, but why, at the deepest level, it matters.
Yes, because this is where so many people get lost. They have the dream, they have the plan, they even start sometimes, but they don't have a deep enough root to hold them through the hard moments.
And the hard moments will come, without exception. The day the enthusiasm runs out, the day something doesn't work, the day life gets busy and the dream is the easiest thing to deprioritize, the day you look at someone further ahead than you and feel discouraged.
On that day, the quality of your why determines whether you continue.
If your why is, I want to be successful, or I want to make money, or I want people to be impressed, those are surface level whys. They feel exciting when things are going well, but they are not strong enough to hold you through resistance.
Because success and money and admiration are external rewards, and external rewards require external conditions that you cannot always control. If those conditions aren't present, if the success isn't coming fast enough, if the money isn't there yet, if nobody is impressed in the early stages, the motivation evaporates.
Whereas a deep why is internal. It's about who you are becoming. It's about what this means to you at a fundamental level. It's about how this connects to your values, your sense of purpose, your relationship with yourself.
I'll give you mine, and it's personal. One of my big dreams is to write a book. The surface why would be recognition, a successful book, people knowing my name, and when I'm honest with myself, yes, part of me wants that. But that part won't carry me through the hard nights.
What's the deep why?
The deep why is that I believe there are things I have understood through living that could genuinely help someone who is struggling. That somewhere there is a person who needs the specific thing I have to say. And the thought of that person waiting and me never writing the book because I was afraid is more uncomfortable than the fear of starting.
The cost of not doing it feels more real than the cost of trying.
That's when the why is deep enough. When the pain of not pursuing the dream becomes greater than the pain of pursuing it imperfectly.
How do you find your deep why?
You ask why more than once. You don't stop at the first answer. If your dream is to start a business and you ask why, and you say, because I want financial freedom, ask again, why do you want financial freedom? Because I want to stop feeling trapped and anxious about money. Why does that matter? Because when I'm anxious about money, I'm not present with the people I love. Why does that matter?
And suddenly, you're not talking about a business anymore.
You're talking about love, about presence, about the quality of your most important relationships.
And that is a why that will survive a bad month, a failed launch, a discouraging setback, because it's connected to what you fundamentally value as a human being.
So the dream doesn't change, but the root of it goes so much deeper that nothing can pull it out.
Nothing. And a dream with deep enough roots will grow through anything.
Okay, Sophia, I need to go open that beautiful notebook.
And write one sentence in it.
Just one. An embarrassingly small one.
That's exactly right.
All right, everyone, time for our vocabulary segment. Let's break down 5 powerful words and phrases from today's conversation that will help sharpen your English.
First up, neurological/neurologically.
Meaning, neurological means relating to the nervous system and the brain, the physical, biological mechanisms behind thought, feeling, and behavior. When we say something is neurological, we mean it is rooted in actual brain function, not just mindset or personality. Understanding that procrastination and avoidance are neurological responses, real, physical, measurable reactions in the brain, shifts the conversation from blame to strategy. You are not broken. Your brain is functioning as designed. The question is how to work with it rather than against it.
Example sentence. Her therapist helped her understand that her pattern of avoiding important tasks wasn't a character flaw. It was a neurological response rooted in her brain's threat detection system, and recognizing that changed everything about how she approached change.
Number 2, avoidance/avoidance response.
Meaning, avoidance is the behavior of staying away from or not engaging with something that causes discomfort, fear, or anxiety. An avoidance response is when your brain automatically steers you towards safer, less threatening activities to reduce psychological discomfort. In the context of goals and dreams, avoidance is what happens when you suddenly find yourself doing everything except the important thing. Cleaning, scrolling, reorganizing, anything that keeps you away from the vulnerability of pursuing what matters.
Example sentence. He noticed that every time he sat down to work on his application, he would find something else urgently needed doing, a classic avoidance response that his brain had designed to protect him from the fear of rejection.
Number 3, perfectionism.
Meaning, perfectionism is the belief that anything less than perfect is unacceptable, and the resulting behavior of either working obsessively to achieve an impossible standard or avoiding starting altogether to protect yourself from the inevitable imperfection of a first attempt. In the context of big dreams, perfectionism is particularly dangerous because it has the disguise of high standards. It looks like caring deeply, but it functions as the most elegant form of self-sabotage.
Example sentence. Her perfectionism had kept her from publishing a single piece of writing for 3 years, not because she wasn't talented, but because every draft she produced fell short of the vision in her head, and she couldn't tolerate releasing something imperfect.
Number 4, self-concept.
Meaning, your self-concept is the internal image and story you hold about who you are, your beliefs about your own identity, capabilities, personality, and worth. It is not just how you feel about yourself, but how you define yourself. Your brain is powerfully motivated to maintain consistency with your self-concept, which is why behavior change that contradicts your current self-image feels so uncomfortable, and why the most sustainable change happens when the self-concept itself shifts.
Example sentence. He had always held a self-concept of being not a sporty person, which is why every attempt to build an exercise habit had collapsed. It wasn't until he started thinking of himself as someone who moves every day that the behavior finally stuck.
And finally, number 5, procrastination.
Meaning, procrastination is the act of delaying or postponing tasks or actions, especially important ones, often in favor of more comfortable or immediately rewarding activities. Critically, and this is what most people misunderstand, procrastination is not primarily a time management problem. Research now consistently shows that procrastination is an emotion regulation strategy. We procrastinate not because we are lazy, but because the task is associated with negative emotions, anxiety, self-doubt, boredom, frustration, and the brain is seeking relief from those emotions in the short term at the cost of our longer-term goals. Example sentence. Once she stopped seeing her procrastination as laziness and started seeing it as an emotional response to anxiety around the task, she was able to address the actual source of the problem, and her productivity transformed almost immediately.
Jason, how are you feeling after this conversation?
Honestly, like I owe myself an apology and a plan. The apology for calling myself lazy all these years, and the plan for what I'm doing tonight.
That's the exact right response. Less guilt, more action.
Which brings us to your challenge. And this one is urgent.
Here it is. Tonight, we want you to do 3 things. Small ones, real ones, in this order.
Step 1. Write down the dream. The specific one. The one you keep circling back to. Not vaguely, specifically. Not, I want to do something creative, but I want to learn to play guitar. Or I want to start a food blog. Or I want to apply for that program. Name it.
Step 2. Write down the embarrassingly small first action. The one step so tiny your amygdala barely notices it. 1 sentence, 1 email, 1 search, 1 phone call. Whatever it is, it must be completable in under 10 minutes.
Step 3. Do that step before you go to sleep tonight.
Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Tonight, while the conversation is still alive in you.
And then come to the comments and tell us, what is the dream? What was the step? Did you do it?
Because writing it in the comments makes it real. It creates accountability, and your courage will give someone else permission to take their own first step.
We read every single comment, and we will be cheering for each one of you.
If this conversation landed somewhere true for you today, please share it with one person who has big dreams and a full notes folder and not enough action. It might be exactly the episode that changes something for them.
Hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a week with us.
And before we go, here's the thought we want you to carry with you.
Please.
Your brain is not your enemy. It is the most sophisticated survival machine ever created, but it was built for a different world. In this world, the thing that will most change your life is not a physical risk. It is a dream that requires you to be seen, to try, to possibly fail, and to keep going anyway. Your brain will call that dangerous. It is not dangerous. It is necessary, and it is yours. The dream has been waiting patiently inside you for exactly as long as it has taken you to get here. Now you know why you stopped. Now you know how to begin. The only question left is whether you will.
You have everything you need. Go. Tonight. 1 sentence, 1 step, 1 beginning.
This is Sophia and Jason, signing off from the English Connect podcast.
Keep learning, keep growing. And tonight, open the folder. Name the dream. Take the step.